Scared to shower? Terrified of the TV? Avoiding driving? That's just the beginning. You won't believe which horror movies have ruined everyday activities. Keep watching to find out. Warning, this video contains fast, flashing images. Viewer discretion is advised, especially for those with photosensitive epilepsy. Even though Psycho might have the most famous shower death in cinema history, it isn't exactly a likely scenario. Not many people spend their nights showering at a rural motel run by a burgeoning serial killer. That being said, there is one movie with a shower scare that's bound to haunt viewers every time they turn on the water. In Frank Marshall's Arachnophobia, a foreign species of killer spider runs rampant in a small California town. It's up to the newly arrived doctor, played by Jeff Daniels, to stop the threat before it grows out of control. In the movie's early moments, Marshall delights in constantly teasing the spider's presence. They're always just out of sight, hidden in lampshades or crouched in the dark, with Marshall milking the tension for everything it's worth. In one standout sequence, a young woman takes a shower, unaware that a spider has crawled in next to her. It's only after the bug has crawled all the way down from her face to her waist that she notices its presence and lets out a blood-curdling scream. It's a cruel bout of tension, but it's incredibly effective. There's no denying that The Ring is one of the most memorable horror movies ever made. While Hideo Nakata's 1998 original is a classic in its own right, director Gore Verbinski's take on the story is a rare example of a remake living up to the expectations set by the original. Perhaps on account of simply releasing later or a more assured grip on the source material, Verbinski's 2002 version is a grim, compelling, and genuinely haunting tale. While its power might have diminished a bit in the years since its release, largely because VHS tapes are all but non-existent nowadays, The Ring still makes the simple process of watching something for the first time feel way more ominous than it ought to.
I'm sure it's a lot scarier at night.
The story of a cursed videocassette that kills viewers 7 days after they watch it, The Ring was released at the perfect time. The late 90s and early 2000s were a transitional period in tech history. A whole lot of people were shaken up by Y2K, and tech anxiety was a common phenomenon. Existing fears about the future made The Ring's cursed tape feel much more terrifying. And now, in our social media age, the concept of a killer video is scarier than ever before. Unfortunately, you're not safe from the spirits just because you've thrown away your VCR. As the Freeling family learns in Tobe Hooper's Poltergeist, disturbing an ancient burial ground will turn even the most high-tech television set into an instrument of pure terror. Poltergeist revitalized the haunted house subgenre, shifting the paranormal activity from gothic coastal manors right to the suburbs. A regular family, not a group of gothic residents with rich histories and suspicious lineage, is the subject of the hauntings, making for a much more relatable experience.
They're here.
Fun and scary in equal measure, Poltergeist pushed the boundaries of what PG horror could be, and contributed to the development of the PG-13 rating in the process. It took a common household object, the television set, and rendered it terrifying. Images of a family gathered together around the television were replaced with ghostly hands and bolts of electricity, desperate to kidnap living souls. It's hard to imagine anyone looking at their bulky tube TV the same way again, and it's no wonder that Steve Freeling wants nothing to do with one by the end of the film. Unfortunately, not even flat screens are safe, with the 2015 Poltergeist remake showing that they're just as capable of letting in the undead. There probably isn't a single driver on the road today who isn't at least remotely familiar with the opening premonition from director David R. Ellis's Final Destination 2. In a franchise with causes of death featuring everything from car washes to escalators, it's the first premonition in the second Final Destination film that has endured the strongest. In the opening sequence, the chain to a logging truck snaps, sending massive tree trunks bouncing down the freeway. They crash into vehicles, impale drivers through the windshield, and embed themselves in the memories of terrified audience members. As a result, it's hard to find a driver who isn't inclined to change lanes when they find themselves behind such a truck. Even though the odds of such a gruesome accident actually happening are astronomically low, the visceral nature of Ellis's staging makes it stick in your brain long after the credits have rolled. Driving is a risky endeavor to start with, but it's made all the worse when imagining the worst possible scenarios that might occur on a slick, heavily trafficked road. Final Destination 2 isn't David Ellis's only appearance on this list. Snakes on a Plane made it clear that the late director had a passion for ruining travel in all its forms. Reshot in order to amp up its more explicit elements, Snakes on a Plane was released in the summer of 2006. While it never soared to the financial heights executives might have hoped for, it remains a campy cult classic, even when it has most of the bad words taken out.
I have had it with these monkey-fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane!
Flying is an innately terrifying experience. There are few people who actively feel comfortable while hurtling above the clouds in an enormous aluminum tube. Naturally, Ellis makes it worse by adding hundreds of deadly snakes to the mix. Even though the film remains iconic, mostly thanks to Samuel L. Jackson's comedic performance, Snakes on a Plane remains darkly compelling. Pythons, cobras, and all manner of dangerous serpents wreak terror on unsuspecting travelers at the most surprising times. They're in the oxygen masks, hidden in toilets, and coiled in overhead compartments. As silly as it might seem, it may be worth checking for snakes the next time you take a flight. There have been a lot of horror movies about the internet in recent years, but the scariest one of all came out all the way back in 2001. In Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Pulse, the spirit world is both lonely and overcrowded. As a result, ghosts are trying to make their way back to reality through an unlikely conduit, the World Wide Web. As two different groups try to uncover the truth, phantoms invade both the real and virtual worlds, exposing the people of Tokyo to unthinkable horrors. The internet is a scary place. If you're not careful, you could get trolled, scammed, or doxxed. But it's also a lonely place, where our constant connection alienates us from each other like never before. That might not seem like it makes much sense on the surface, but Pulse highlights the contradictions of our modern world and weaves them into one of the most fantastically frightening films of the century. Featuring gothic imagery, terrifying ghosts, and the scariest dial-up tones you'll ever hear, Pulse will keep you second-guessing who's really behind that strange username. Stephen King has had a whole lot of his works adapted into films. Some of those films are great, others not so much. Regardless, as one of the most prolific writers still working today, King's movie adaptations are so diverse that they might as well be a subgenre all their own. 1408 is definitely one of King's lesser-known stories, but that doesn't mean its movie adaptation fails to bring the scares. The film version of 1408, directed by Mikael Hofstrom, will definitely get audiences to think twice before they book another hotel room. John Cusack stars as Michael Enslin, a wary author who specializes in paranormal skepticism. Driven by grief and estrangement from his wife, he opts to take it out on the ghosts that he doesn't actually believe exist. He books room 1408 at the Dolphin, a supposedly haunted hotel. But unfortunately for Michael, room 1408 is genuinely haunted. Featuring plenty of ghosties and heaps of suffocating paranoia, 1408 makes excellent use of its limited scope, turning a standard hotel room into a house of horrors. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door. Freddy's rhyme is as iconic as the movie monster himself, and even those who haven't seen Wes Craven's 1984 masterpiece probably know how it ends. Stop Freddy or never sleep again. Existing in a nightmarish dreamscape, supernatural serial killer Freddy Krueger spends his afterlife offing his high school victims during their most vulnerable unconscious moments. Unfortunately for him, though, they aren't going down without a fight.
What's with kids today, huh? No respect.
Even though the franchise grew increasingly sillier as it progressed, both the original Nightmare and its 2010 remake make great use of everyday tasks to combat drowsiness. The Elm Street protagonists drink excessive amounts of coffee, burn themselves, and even suffer from micronaps when they've been awake for too long. While most horror movies inspire nightmares, A Nightmare on Elm Street endures by suggesting that those nightmares might actually spell your doom. The inciting attack on little Georgie Dembro is arguably the most famous scene in any iteration of Stephen King's It, from the novel to the made-for-TV adaptation to Andy Muschietti's 2017 remake. A perfectly calibrated opening scene, it taps into primal fears and swiftly establishes just how threatening Pennywise the Dancing Clown really is. While the made-for-TV adaptation is mostly carried by Tim Curry's sensational performance as Pennywise, it's Muschietti's iteration that emerges as the most effective, largely on account of how brutal and unforgiving it is. In both the novel and original adaptation, Georgie is killed after Pennywise bites his arm off and leaves him to die. In the remake, Georgie's arm is still bitten off in a graphic sequence, but instead of being left to die, he's dragged into the sewer, never to be seen again. Regardless of which version you prefer, it's still an extremely grisly fate. Fans of It likely can't help but think twice before hopping the curb over a storm drain on a rainy day. Dee Wallace's performance in Louis Teague's Cujo is one of the most underappreciated performances ever seen in a Stephen King adaptation. Nothing against Shelley Duvall or Kathy Bates, but Wallace delivers a next-level performance as a mother trapped in a car with her young son as a rabid St. Bernard roams free around them. It's not an especially showy performance, but it's exceptionally committed, almost powerful enough to distract you from how terrifying dogs can be. Almost. Even though the titular Cujo isn't Wallace's dog, the point still stands. Cujo can make any dog owner second-guess their own canine companion. Given how sweet and snuggly puppies can be, it's easy to forget that most larger breeds could deal some serious damage to a human if they really wanted to. Cujo doesn't skimp on the canine carnage. This dog is calculated, cruel, and relentless. While almost all real-life dogs are much less bloodthirsty, Cujo is scary enough to plant the seed of doubt in even the most loving owner's head. Dick Maas's The Lift, originally titled Die Lift in Dutch, isn't strictly speaking a good movie. While it's better than Maas's own English-language remake Down from 2001, it's too gimmicky to work as anything more than a kind of cult curiosity. That being said, Maas does at least manage to tap into a persisting fear, one that stretches all the way back to the infamous Room for One More urban legend. Elevators are scary. Thanks to their inducing of both claustrophobia and acrophobia, few people genuinely enjoy elevator rides. Sure, they're convenient, but the minute the cage rattles or the cables jangle, it's impossible not to imagine plummeting several stories to your death. The Lift is exactly what it says on the tin, a killer elevator. It's ridiculous, yes, but as cables decapitate workers and people fall down the shaft, it's effective enough to get your blood pumping. The grisly nature of Maas's elevator is guaranteed to get you to take the stairs. The legacy of Jaws goes without saying. The greatest shark movie ever made, and almost certainly the greatest there ever will be, is responsible for an entire generation's fear of the ocean. Steven Spielberg's adaptation of Peter Benchley's best-selling novel turned a New England beach into a hotbed of terror. Even though the likelihood of a great white shark appearing off the coast of an island town and terrorizing its citizens is all but non-existent, that didn't stop audiences from quickly assuming the worst.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
From its iconic quotes to its trio of sensational main characters, Jaws is the peak of blockbuster cinema for good reason. It's big, it's scary, and it turns a simple trip to the beach into an exercise in terror. Whether ocean, lake, or swimming pool, it's impossible to forget the visceral images of a great white's dorsal fin breaching the surface. Who needs to get in the water anyway? Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more SlashFilm videos about your favorite horror movies are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.